Well, I do have a little black book with my list of companies that I'd like to work with. I think I could share that over a pint sometime, Gary, to be honest.
Hi, I'm Gary, and this is an episode of the Commercial EV Musings podcast. On the show today, we'll be talking with TransitionWise. This episode is one in an occasional series I do, which don't fall into the regular EV Musings episodes. Those episodes are aimed at EV drivers and those considering moving into electric vehicles. But occasionally, I get approached by companies who work in a slightly different segment of the EV sphere. Having them on the main podcast is probably not appropriate, but I still want to have a discussion with them. They might have products that are not necessarily appropriate for EV drivers, for example. Do you know many who want to buy 400 kilowatt ultra rapid chargers? Or they may be aimed at a more business to business market rather than a business to consumer market, which is why I put together the commercial EV Musings episodes. You won't find these episodes in the normal EV Musings feed, but if you've got a specific niche or a product or a company that I find interesting, I'll come and chat with you about it. If you find these episodes interesting, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment and click that little notification bell on YouTube. This episode of the Commercial EV Musings podcast is sponsored by TransitionWise. TransitionWise is a consultancy that helps organizations to go electric, both in the logistics space and in the blue light services. They'll work with you on your strategy, whilst offering a range of smart products that enable your transition and get you there at minimal risk. So I'd like to welcome to the show, Leo Pickford. Leo, can you introduce yourself and tell the viewers what it is you do?
My name is Leo Pickford. I'm the founder and CEO of TransitionWise, a leading edge consultancy at the forefront of electrification, primarily focusing on electric heavy goods vehicles, but also branching out into blue lights recently as well. So a broad focus, but mainly trucks.
Fantastic. And we're going to cover all of that, especially the blue lights. We're going to have some special section on the blue lights later on. But I just want to go back a little bit and talk about what it is in your background that's kind of led you to where you are today in terms of the truck aspect. Talk to me a little bit about a former job and how that's influenced you.
Well, the former role, I was working for Euston Logistics as their head of business change. Broad portfolio of projects, but the thing that really got me interested was one of those projects was bringing in electric trucks, and I introduced their first electric trucks into the business. They were 19-ton curtain sliders, so not your big 44-tonners, but it was quite a change to bring electric trucks in with 22 kilowatt chargers, and it was quite an exciting project just to manage the change, the introduction of something completely new into logistics. So I think that got me interested, and then I decided to start my own business with TransitionWise.
So when you were looking at the curtain sliders and putting the charging in, was it you who was kind of leading that, or did you see somebody else doing it and think to yourself, I like this, this is something that I think is the future? What was your actual thought process there?
Well, it was my project. Was up against a number of people who thought electric wasn't the future. It was going to be hydrogen. I mean, you've heard the stories, Gary. So I saw it as a challenge really to tackle that point of view and show people that electric was doable. It fitted the use case very well. The customer was keen after a number of conversations with them, and the products on the market are good enough today. I think that's something that's very, very clear, is that even back then, 3-4 years ago now, the products available were absolutely fitting to what was needed. And they've worked extremely well after being introduced.
Good. So what was it about seeing the implementation of electric trucks at your old company? What was it that led you to say, oh, I can do that, I'll start my own business?
Well, I think it was really seeing it as the thin end of the wedge. There's a very large industry, 500,000 trucks. At the moment, an extremely small percentage, less than 1%, are electric. And so we've got a long way to go, but we've got to do it fairly quickly. In 2035, smaller end of the vehicle sizes really have to be electric. 2040, all trucks, all new trucks anyway, need to be. So whereas with cars, we've got the electric vehicle mandates. That hasn't come in yet for commercial vehicles. We don't have that sort of escalator each year saying a percentage needs to be electric. So I'd say there's a large part of the logistics industry that are not taking those sorts of transition steps, or dare I say it, they're going to HVO or low carbon fuels because they're simply, a drop-in option. It's not to say that's not a reasonable interim step, but you need to be looking at that electric future, because I think those who don't will ultimately lose out.
And I want to come back and talk about that a little bit later on, but let's just move to TransitionWise itself as a company. If I was an investor and I came up and said, right, what's the elevator pitch for TransitionWise? What would that be?
Okay, well, TransitionWise is able to help organizations transition to electric by designing the operation first, not just buying trucks and chargers. And that's very important because we can then help it work at scale, and it's not just a leap into the dark. TransitionWise isn't just a simple consultancy. It's about really seeing what the future will take to achieve. So anyone can come along and say, these are the trucks you need to buy, these are the chargers you need to buy, but why and how? Yeah, there's a lot more to it. It's business transformation at the end of the day. There's a lot of things involved in going from A to B. And so what TransitionWise is able to do is look at your whole business operation and say that business will look like this in the future. Yes, it will need this type of truck, and we're not tied to a particular brand. I mean, that's one thing I'd like to say. But it will need, this type of truck, this number of them, this type of charger, a number of them. Their locations will need to be here. Sometimes that means the warehouses being in different places. So the entire operation may need to evolve, if you like. But there's also a change aspect in terms of the people. Digital systems need to change very significantly in some cases, and the whole thing needs to be carefully orchestrated. So it is a complex business transformation to get it right. Lots of people have tried it and got it wrong. They bought some trucks, they bought some chargers, and it doesn't quite line up.
What is the TransitionWise target market? Because obviously you've got a large number of organizations out there who are running freight operations or delivery operations of some sort. And potentially they're all your target market. But if they're all your target market, then you don't really have a target market. What is your actual niche? Who are you aiming TransitionWise at?
Well, it's really, if you look at the market in the UK, I mean, we've got 500,000 trucks on the road, but it's a case of a few big companies and then a very long tail of much smaller companies. Now, what I would love to happen is that very long tail all get it and all want to go electric. Now, I don't see that happening. I see a lot of them continuing for as long as they can with their current way of operating. I then see a load of consolidation going on. They've got to consolidate to actually tackle the investment costs of moving to a new way of operating and existing. So where TransitionWise really want to focus is those in the middle. They're big enough to have the investment vision to actually go electric now. They're probably not your Amazons and Kuehne and Nagels and so on right at the top end who are already doing it, and they're not your small family firms that can't afford it.
Do you have any potential names that you'd like to share of companies that are working in the space that you would like to target?
Well, I do have a little black book with my list of companies that I'd like to work with. I think I could share that over a pint sometime, Gary, to be honest.
Okay. Fair enough. Now there is another segment that you're sort of aiming at, which is the blue light part, the blue light fleet. Now, I want to go into a little bit more detail about that a little bit later on, but just talk at a high level about why you're looking at, the fire, police and ambulance.
Well, to be quite honest, I got into that completely by accident. I was at a truck show primarily, and I handed a business card out, and 6 months later I got a phone call. So I didn't initially target that market at all. However, it led to working for London Ambulance Service, which was a fantastic project, really good one to have under my belt, one that I'm quite proud of. And so at that point, I'm able to then say, right, what can TransitionWise bring to blue light? And that's not only ambulance, but fire and police as well.
Now, as I say, I want to come on in a few minutes and talk specifically about the project that you just mentioned with London Ambulance. But before we do that, let's talk about smart products. Talk to me about what TransitionWise are producing as a suite of smart products.
So at the moment, Gary, there's 4 of them.
And what are they individually? And then we'll talk about each one specifically.
Okay. So the 4 are energy management, fleet vault, truck as a service, and change management.
Wonderful. So talk to me a little bit about energy management.
Okay. So I think a lot of people are starting to see the way that the grid is doing quite a lot around offering flexibility and various very clever services that you can tap into. Yeah. So energy management is something that, really came about at a point where, people are looking to transition to electric trucks, but they're saying, well, an electric truck is very expensive to buy. And yes, it's a lot more than a diesel truck. Now, energy management is a way to bring forward that total cost of ownership, or TCO, cutover point. If you can get cheaper energy in your depot, you are able to offset the high costs of a truck. Yeah, you want to have nice, secure, reliable, low cost energy. So energy management is, I think, a fantastic way to help do that. It's, if I put it this way, you've got a smart energy base with everything around your depot. You've got solar on the roof. You might have static batteries. You've got a grid connection. You could even have other things plugged into your AI capability, and the energy management is the AI that manages what's going on with all the energy coming in and out, and effectively works to lower the overall cost per kilowatt hour.
And is it a specific product that you've developed through AI, or is it hardware that has AI built into it? What physically is it that we're talking about?
We're talking about a software platform which then allows trucks, vans, cars, whatever vehicles to use energy, in that location. If you're able to have a large fleet operating, then you can really take advantage of the ability to throw power backs and forwards from the grid. Maybe you stop charging for a period of time, that generates cash. Depending on the way it's set up, you can push energy back to the grid, that generates cash. So I'm very excited about this product, actually.
Fantastic. So talk to me a little bit about your next smart product, which is Fleet Vault, please.
Okay, so Fleet Vault, here TransitionWise have a white labeled version of one of the, I think, leading platforms in the industry, which is able to take data from a fleet of vehicles, then look at that telematics data, so look at all the movement of the vehicles, and then determine where those vehicles are stopping, how long they're stopping for, and therefore where to place chargers, how powerful those chargers need to be, and basically, the right sort of infrastructure set up for the fleet. If that fleet, which might be diesel today, goes electric, what is that charger base going to look like?
So when you say identifying where chargers need to be placed, are you talking about which depots on a specific route will need chargers to enable a fleet to make that without having to public charge? Or are you talking about where should public charging be installed?
It's principally depots. So, if vehicles are operating in and out of home depots or other depots, then they can, usually have a stopping time. That might vary day to day. So we look at a period of time, perhaps 1 to 3 months that we analyze the data for. Then we're able to produce a view of what we believe are the right numbers of chargers and the power of charger those should be. Sometimes they will need public charging, yes. It will just depend on the operation.
Okay. And are you linking in to sort of external third parties such as Power because they have the ability to be able to see their Power Pins offering where they're able to share depot charging with companies that don't part of a different fleet? Is there any aspect of that either within Fleet Vault or within the energy management that allows you to do that?
So we're looking at that as well. We don't specifically do that with Fleet Vaults or energy management at the moment, but we have active discussions with Power around working with their capabilities. We certainly look at fuel cards connections and we talk to fleets about which fuel cards they're using. Power is one of the options there, and I've actually been very impressed by the work that Niall and his team have done. I think they've done some excellent work in that space.
Talk to me a little bit about the truck or trucking as a service smart product that you have.
Truck as a service is really sort of linking back, Gary, to that CCA cutover issue that we were talking about before, and the high upfront cost of electric trucks. And I think it's really a case of how can we bring that TCO hump, in the costs phasing down a bit. So what truck as a service does is it takes the cost of the truck, the cost of the electricity, and the cost of the infrastructure, it wraps it together and breaks it down into a per kilometer charge. So you literally pay per kilometer and you get trucks, chargers, and electricity.
So presumably you've done some sort of calculation which has done a similar thing for the TCO of a diesel, and you've worked out a per kilometer cost for a diesel. And how competitive is it between the diesel TCO and the truck as a service kilometer charge?
Well, over the short term, diesel always wins. But if you stretch the timeline out, so if you have a longer deal, then electric truck as a service wins. So if customers are prepared to sign up for, let's say, an 8-year deal, they can often undercut. If they are going for a lot of kilometers, then they're definitely undercutting. Yeah, because that cost of electricity and sweating the assets really, that really comes in, and it comes way down under the diesel. And so they're able to sign up for something which is immediately cheaper than diesel. It's like almost walking into a dealership, getting your vehicle straight away, getting your chargers as soon as they can be stuck in the ground, and driving off with something that's already cheaper than diesel. You just need to sign up to the length of the deal.
So given that you're including a cost per kilowatt hour, at some point you're going to have to take a risk on what the price of electricity is. So is trucking as a service something that is added after somebody has gone for energy management and fleet vault? Because that's obviously the way that you can help to go, particularly with the energy management, how you can help to use your phrase, sweat the asset and make sure that you're getting the lowest price for electricity as possible. Otherwise, are you not at the vagaries of the national grid and, what happens when we have another Russia invading Ukraine? How have you dealt with that sort of risk aspect?
Yeah, well, the cost of the electricity piece, we need to put certain, let me say, guarantees in and barriers, if you like, to excessive movements in the electricity price. So there are things which are, let me say, they're things I can't talk about. Those have been looked at. The only thing that is not included at the moment is insurance. But we can put that in very easily.
You mentioned 8 years potentially for I don't know whether we're talking a contract or whatever, but you mentioned 8 years. Is that the kind of lifespan of a typical truck, or would a customer expect to have a new truck sort of within 4 years, still within the truck as a service contract?
Well, it completely depends on the distance that they're covering. Yeah. So the minimum to make truck as a service really work, you need 700,000 kilometers. But if you're going to 1 million plus and you're spreading that out over 8 years, that is the sweet spot. That's where it really starts to work.
Let's finish off with the fourth of your smart products, which is change management. Talk to me about that.
Okay. So I think change management links back well to TransitionWise's elevator pitch. It's no good just buying trucks and buying chargers, but you're looking at a whole organization going through an operating model change. You're talking about people as well. There will be a lot of people who need to embrace something completely new, and it's different for them. It's a massive change at the end of the day. Even when you get to a proportion of the fleet being electric, that's going to have impacts. And so change management is exactly what it says on the tin. It's looking at the people side, it's looking at the organization side, and it's de-risking that change. It's the things that can start going horribly wrong if you just buy equipment and try and expect people to use it. What I will say is that TransitionWise has all the right qualifications in this space. So there is a change management organization called ProSci, which is able to certify its members, and TransitionWise has that certification. They use a process called ADKAR, where each of those letters stands for something. You've got awareness, desire, and knowledge. Then you've got action and responsibility. But the knowledge part of it, you don't even get to that if you don't have desire. So people will just not embrace things if they're not taken through that step by step. Change is so important. So people dismiss it and just say, well, no point spending money on that. But, projects that have proper change management are 7 times more likely to succeed. And that's data from thousands of projects.
So if I was to sort of use my favorite phrase here and play devil's advocate, you can't really run a project without change management. Therefore, why is change management a separate smart product? Surely that is inherent in everything you do at TransitionWise.
So there's an element of it, Gary. I think it's fair to say that. And, general change management, people that run projects tend to learn that and embrace that. But it's a very well articulated and structured process that you follow in more complex projects to ensure that the people side is really dealt with. So, good example, you will have the well poisoners, those who will say, what if it runs out of battery on the side of the road? Yeah. And they'll start spreading their negativity, and that negativity will infect more and more people until your project's stuck in the mud. Now, what change management does is have individuals in each team who are the positive people pushing the positive message and actually tackling those negative well poisoners, if you like, as soon as they start to rear their heads, and making sure that they're taken along on the journey as well. So that's just one of the many elements of good change management.
Okay, cool. So are you looking at any other sort of smart products in the future?
Yes. The plan is to have 10 smart products ultimately, and each of these being ready to go so that when you engage TransitionWise, there'll be an initial conversation which determines what you want to achieve and the timeline, and then which of the smart products fits. And you might end up with 2 of the smart products, which are the right combination for your opportunity. It might be you need 4 of the smart products together. And so, there's that capability and versatility to actually shape the solution for each customer.
So it's like the, if I could show my age now, it's like the old Littlewood pools where you have to, you can pick any 8 from 10 and that's the thing that you need to be able to run your project. You don't always need to have all of the smart products on all the projects.
Exactly.
Let's move on a little bit and talk about the blue light offerings. We have mentioned the blue light offerings earlier on. Let's talk a little bit about the London Ambulance project. You did mention it briefly, but what was the story behind that project and how it came to you?
Yeah, so this one, I was at a truck show and just handed my business card out and, thought nothing of it. I had a very good conversation with an individual, and then 6 months later, I got a phone call. That turned into, can you help us out? And in a very short time frame, it really was quite high pressure. There was the need to analyse where the infrastructure needed to go, which sites, and how we were going to get London Ambulance to 27% electric in 2026.
All right. So talk to me about a little bit about the detail on that. Sort of how many locations were you looking at?
Yeah, well, the portfolio of locations that London Ambulance operate across, has been, a very large number. If you think about ambulance stations, they tend to be, almost like, some of them are little sheds in back streets, but, all around the city, if you know London at all. They've had a strategy to consolidate into fewer larger sites, which I think works much better for electrification, and particularly if you need to get chargers in, if you need to move vehicles around. So there was already a thinking process which was going in the right direction, but what there wasn't was, where do we put the chargers? Which sites are definitely going to be the ones that we're going to keep, based on access to power, based on, how many chargers and what level of power a charger. That information was not there. So TransitionWise were able to do some pretty deep analysis on literally where the vehicle's moving. So this was using the fleet vault capability, looking at the vehicle's movements over time, where they're stopping, how long for, and how much recharging they need when they stop.
As a general rule, did you end up putting in rapid chargers, 50 kilowatts, or was it 22 kilowatts, 11 kilowatts? What was the sort of end result that you had with the charging for that?
So it's been a mixture, Gary. I think, I can't really say exactly the numbers, but it's been a mixture of high-powered chargers and AC. And I think, that's highly versatile because you've sometimes got a vehicle that needs to come in, charge up, and then zip out again. Other times you've got one that comes in and it's sat there all night.
And how many locations did you end up actually installing chargers at?
Well, the installations are going in at 20 locations this year, and that's a very significant project to actually put the infrastructure in.
Mm-hmm.
That would take the fleet up to 27%, as I've said, which is a huge step up. And I think all the ambulance services have similar targets to get to all electric much, much quicker than trucks. So the NHS-wide deadlines that have come in are actually quite demanding. So they've said 2030 for all ambulances, all new vehicles being electric from that point onwards, with non-dual crew ambulances being 2028.
So given that you've had the success with the London Ambulance Service, how has that set you up now moving forward? Are you looking at other ambulance services? Are you looking at other blue lights? Are you actively there? Or is it, you now have an offering that you can give to any blue light service that wants it?
So there's an offering available for the blue lights area. Yeah. So absolutely, we're able to offer that to ambulance services, police and fire as well as potential customers. And that's in parallel to the HGVs. So, it's a broadening of what TransitionWise does, but not a dilution. I see these as adjacent customer bases.
So, Leah, let's talk a little bit. We've talked around what it is that TransitionWise offer, and you've given examples for London Ambulance. And I think you did mention it right at the top, but talk to me in a little bit more detail about why the transition to electric vehicles is important from your point of view.
Okay, Gary. Well, I think, if I start with the trucks space, we've currently got a fleet of vehicles which represents 1% of those on the road, but they're producing about 20% of all road carbon emissions. So a very significant part of the pollution coming from that space. And whilst we've got the 2035 and the 2040 deadlines, what I've noticed is there isn't really a great big, bow wave of effort to get there. Outside of ZHID, things could move a lot faster. So I really want to be part of helping that happen.
And how much is this reluctance due to this perceived, because you mentioned total cost of ownership, and we know that over the long term, the total cost of ownership of electric is lower than diesel. But of course, everybody is looking at the upfront cost, because are big electric trucks, twice as expensive as diesel ones? And then you've got all the infrastructure to put in. Talk to me about total cost of ownership for fleets and how that's playing into this.
So, yeah, I mean, you're roughly right, Gary. The cost has been coming down, but you're still roughly twice as much, sometimes a bit more for the premium electric trucks. And that plays a lot into the calculation when logistics is not a high profit margin industry, but you're working on, very low percentages in terms of profits, and it really does come down to the costs. You've also got alternatives such as biofuels, which are just drop in. I'm not saying that biofuels aren't an option for the short term, but you need to have, the hard yards done with electric. It means the infrastructure, it means the investments, and it's a big job, but that's where we're heading.
Interesting. So talk to me about microgrids.
Okay. So TransitionWise is a big believer in microgrids. The cost of electricity in this country, we're always talking about how it's far too high. To make TCO for trucks affordable, you need to have much cheaper electricity so that it offsets the high upfront costs of a truck. And so that means you can focus on the electricity cost, and the best way to do that which is in your gift as a logistics company, is to look at a microgrid. That means taking the power focus slightly away from the national grids and saying, right, we're going to have solar on the roof, we're going to have our own battery storage, we're going to have other forms of generation, and we're going to get our cost per kilowatt hour down. So I call it the smart energy base, is having your own generation and storage capability. And then it's the additional ability of being able to trade energy or lack of usage of energy with the grid to then get cash back.
Given that one of the factors that plays into total cost of ownership is, as you've just mentioned there, the price of electricity. And if you could put a microgrid in and it's going to reduce the cost of electricity at the depot, that's fine. In your experience, how many of the HGVs that you've been, or the companies that do this kind of thing that you've been working with, how often do they end up having to go out to the Mylance charging hubs and pay the public charging price? How often does that happen, and how does that sort of skew the total cost of ownership figures?
Well, it is a very important consideration, Gary, and percentage public charging comes into any business case. As soon as you go anywhere over about 40%, you start to really impact the business case. And so what we're starting to see is some very good initiatives to actually link up depot charging so that you can charge at your home depot and then charge at other depots of other operators en route. And so that is quite an exciting development at the moment that we're seeing. I mean, it creates a lot of very positive commercial tension in the market. So whereas, let's say, car charging rates, are eye-wateringly high, we're paying 80 pence, 85 pence on a public charger. The going rates for trucks, if you go to Mylance or you go to Fleet or one of the other providers, it's 39 pence, so much better already, but depots will pull that down even further and produce some real commercial tension there. So I think it's quite exciting. That's pushing things in the right direction. As soon as we get anywhere near 25 pence, we're in very competitive terms.
If I could charge at 25 pence in public, that's actually cheaper than me charging at home on peak. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, off peak I get cheap, but on peak I'm paying 29. So 25 pence public charging would be, mind you, I remember 5 or 6 years ago when I was getting 9 pence a kilowatt hour public charging, but different times.
I remember free public charging.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of free. It gets abused.
It does.
It certainly does, yeah. I think you've talked a little bit about this, but talk a little bit about the timelines that you're working on for this, please.
TCO cutover. That's something that, really comes into play when we talk about EHGV. So the point at which, as an industry, as a market, if you like, everything starts to cut over to the point where truck costs are coming down, energy costs are coming down, diesel, well, nobody likes to talk about diesel prices going up, but the total cost of ownership for diesel goes up and there's a cutover point. That could be as soon as 2028. Views on this are skewed in different directions by different factors. So nobody knows for sure. I just think, things like depot charging, things like truck as a service, other clever factors, such as trading energy with the grids, will pull that forward. And so I like the 2028 vision, 2030 at the latest.
Okay. I want to move on to how somebody would sort of engage TransitionWise as a company. So if a company came to you and said, Leo, we want you to help us, what could they expect after that conversation?
So TransitionWise is currently looking for a small number of companies to work with, typically those who are looking seriously at their energy transition and looking to scale. Yeah, so it's not just trying 1 or 2 trucks. It's actually looking at serious numbers. And we'd like to talk to you and share thoughts and share learnings so far. And so that would be a very clear next step, I think. And we're looking to see that pretty soon.
So let's assume somebody who fits that criteria comes to you. What are the steps you're going to go through as part of the engagement? Are you going to look at strategy, for example?
Well, we're going to have a chat about, understanding your business a little. We're going to understand where you want to go to. We'll talk about what that might involve, just at a high level to start with. We'll also ask what your general thoughts are on this space. We're very, very keen to understand, where some companies have already done small scale electric truck introduction, and are then thinking about how do you go bigger without taking massive risk. So that's our ideal partner to work with at the moment.
So what does a fully electrified company look like in 10 years' time?
Well, I think in many cases they're going to have depots in different locations. This is something that not many realize. They're going to have different routes. They're going to have different vehicles, obviously. They're going to have solar on the roof. I mean, only about 10, 12% of warehouses currently have solar, which is just mind blowing. Yeah. I know the reasons why. A lot of the time it's about insurance and leasing and many things that you just wouldn't think of. You can't just put solar on the roof. There's also going to be a number of things that just change in the operation. So it's not just a case of buy trucks, buy chargers, plug it all in.
So, Leo, as we come to the end of our time together, what do you want listeners specifically in your target market to take away from this discussion?
I think the first thing is that, it's going to happen fast. Those who electrify now are gaining huge learning and they're getting ahead. Yeah. So you can't just put it off for 5 years. It's happening now. Yeah. That's the most important thing.
And I'm hoping that there are going to be people who are watching this or listening to this who will be potential customers of yours. So how can they get in touch with you if they want to use your services?
Well, we're currently speaking with fleet and operations leaders preparing for large-scale operation. So if you're actively planning the transition, I'd value a short conversation. That's, really to compare approaches, share what we're seeing. It's a complex environment. And I think there's an opportunity to swap learning here.
Now, I'll put a whole load of links down in the show notes. So do you have a contact form or do you just want somebody to email you or what?
Well, there's a contact form on the website. So if you go to transitionwise.co.uk or you can email directly, it's leo@transitionwise.co.uk.
Fantastic. Great discussion, Leo. Thanks a lot for your time. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Cheers, Gary.